Okay, hi there, Dr. Matthew J. Trom here. It's time for another flipped classroom video. This time we're going to be talking about performing something called a trade study, which is a method for weighting the metrics that go into your down selection matrix. You guys will be doing down selection as part of the preliminary design report, and this is the first step in kind of populating those matrices. So this is there we go. This is the outline of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to describe to you basically what a down selection matrix is very quickly, share with you a trade study template, give you a detailed view of the trade study template, which includes two parts. One's a comparative section, the other is a tally section. I'm going to show you how to use both of those sections, and then ultimately kind of walk you through a quick example of how to generate the weighting factors that end up going in the down selection matrix. So the first thing we're going to do is just introduce the concept of a down selection matrix. So here we have a down selection matrix, and this is comparatively a relatively small one, probably compared to the ones that you guys will be producing for your major projects. And the key kind of outcome for a down selection matrix is to identify the best concept from the list of 12 or so concepts that you generated for each subsystem. So that's ultimately what this does for you. And so you can see here in this column is a list of quantitative metrics. So remember, you took your customer needs and you quantified them. So each one of these metrics, 1, 2, 3, and 4, is representative of a quantified version of a customer need. And ultimately, these are assigned to a particular subsystem. So each matrix represents a single subsystem in your overall design process. And then listed here along the top are the concepts. So concept 1, concept 2, concept 3, and so forth. And what we'll be doing is generating the weighting factor. So this column here that says weight factor, that's effectively the goal of a trade study, is to come up with a weight factor. And how you'll end up using the weight factor is each of the concepts is going to have a normalized value associated with it. So how well that particular concept addresses each of the metrics that you've identified for this particular subsystem. But then some of the metrics are more important than others. And so that's what this weight factor is. And ultimately, once you multiply the normalized value from the concept by the weight factor, you get basically a weighted concept value, which is this one, weighted 1, weighted 2, weighted 3. And those weighted concept values are then summed up, and they give you a quantitative number, which tells you which of your concepts is the best in addressing the needs, the customer needs for that particular concept. So that's kind of the overall big picture. But what we're doing, at least initially, is to come up with the weighting factor, and this is the technique to do that, called the trade study. Okay, so now that you guys have kind of an overview of what we're doing, let me introduce you to the trade study template. And I did upload a Microsoft Excel version of this template onto the learning management system, so you guys will be able to at least see the template. You're probably going to want to end up kind of expanding that template because, again, you guys are going to be dealing with a lot more concepts and a lot more metrics than in the simple examples that I'm giving in this presentation, but it should at least give you kind of a baseline to start with. So here's what the trade study templates look like, and they'll look the same when you grab them off of Microsoft Excel. And kind of the key things here to note is that each subsystem, now remember, you guys probably have somewhere between 5 to maybe even 8 or 9 subsystems for your designs. Each one of those subsystems gets its own template. So I've represented that here with just 2 sets of templates. This is subsystem alpha, and then this set of templates is subsystem beta. So there's 2 here. Ultimately, you're probably going to have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. But each one of your subsystems gets one of these templates assigned to it. So this is what the template looks like, and again, it's available through the learning management software as a Microsoft Excel file. And I just mentioned this, but there's one set per subsystem. And then the other thing that's important is that each team member fills out their own matrix, right? So you can see here I've got team member 1, team member 2, team member 3, and so forth. So you guys are, probably have somewhere between 6 and 8 team members. So you guys are going to have somewhere between 6 and 8 of these individual matrices, and each team member is going to fill out their own matrix for each of the subsystems. So there's an awful lot of kind of material here, numbers that you guys are going to have to fill in, but it's a little bit time consuming, but in the end, you get a very clear sort of quantitative value for what sets those weight factors, whereas if you did it through some other technique, you wouldn't really be able to track where those numbers came from. So this is a very straightforward but also very quantitative way to come up with those weighting factors. Okay, so we're going to look now kind of in a more detailed view of the trade study template. And the first section that I'm going to talk about is the comparative section. So here's just one of those matrices out of the whole array of matrices that's part of the trade study template. So this is just for one subsystem, so subsystem alpha, and for a single team member. And there are two pieces. This piece here to the left, that's the comparative section. And then the piece here to the right is called the tally section. We'll talk about that in a second. But for the comparative section, the way that this works is that I've got each of my metrics. So again, these are the quantitative metrics that you guys defined from the original customer needs. And again, you're probably going to have more than 4, but I wanted to keep this simple and I wanted it to fit onto a PowerPoint slide. So I've just got 4 metrics. So these are quantitative metrics, again, that link back to the customer needs. And they're just called metric 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I also represent them by a letter. So metric 1 corresponds to the letter A, metric 2 corresponds to the letter B, metric 3 corresponds to C, and metric 4 corresponds to D. So you can see them listed across the top here, but then also there's A, B, C, and D, kind of in this stepped pyramid shape in the comparative section of this matrix. So that's kind of the detail of all the pieces that we're going to end up using to carry out the trade study, at least for the comparative section part. Now let's just take a quick look at the tally section. So here's the other part of it to the right, which is the tally section. And really, all the tally section does is just give you a template to allow you to sort of count things up. So you're just going to sum things up, and then you're going to take averages to get percentages. And I'll give you guys an example as we move through the slide deck showing how to do that. Okay. So now I'm going to show you guys how to use the comparative section. And so I've just isolated the comparative section all by itself. And the comparative section is made up, the useful part of it is these sort of empty cells. So this one happens to have 6 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I put an X here in this one just to show you that this is the one that I'm focusing on for this particular example. So what does this cell actually mean, or what does it do for you? Well, here's really where kind of the term trade study, where it starts to make sense, is that you are, each individual team member for the particular subsystem that you're evaluating is going to compare the metric associated with the letter A to the metric, in this case, associated with the letter B. So because I've crossed this or put an X in this cell, I'm looking at sort of how A trades off against or compares against B. So the question really that I need to ask myself is the following. Is A or B a more important metric when I'm evaluating subsystem A? So again, these are quantitative metrics. They come from the customer needs. And which of those customer needs, this is the question that each individual team member, because remember, you're all going to fill one of these out, each individual team member is asking themselves is which one of these customer needs is more important for subsystem A of my overall system. So that's what you're doing. It's just deciding whether A or B is more important for that particular subsystem. Once you've made that binary decision, and I should point out the reason that this technique is so useful and so powerful is it ends up generating these weighting factors that have all kinds of different parameters and all kinds of different sort of features associated with them, and ultimately you're breaking all of that complexity down to just a series of binary decisions. Is A better than B, or is B better than A? So that's what's so powerful about this technique. So you're just making that decision. Is A more important than B? B more important than A? So I haven't really given you a real tangible example here. This is all, again, sort of theoretical. But in this particular example, in comparing metric 1, which is A, to metric 2, which is B, we've decided that metric 1 is more important. So I'm going to put the letter A in the cell to represent A being more important than B. Okay, and then I'm going to continue this for all of the other open cells. Remember, there's 6 of them, so I've got 5 more to do. So here I'm comparing metric 1, which is A, to metric 3, which is C. And in this case, I've determined that C is more important for subsystem alpha. In this cell, I'm comparing metric 1, which is A, to metric 4, which is D, and I've determined that A is more important. Here, I'm comparing B to C, and I've determined that B is more important. Here, I'm comparing B to D, and I've determined that D is more important. And finally, here, I'm comparing C to D, and I'm determining that C is more important. So you guys are going to fill out your templates, and of course, you're going to have probably a lot more metrics than I have. But you're going to fill out this template until you've filled out all of these essentially binary decisions, which one is better than the other. And then once you are finished with this, then you're ready to move on to the tally section. So here's how the tally section works. It's really simple. The word tally means to count up, and that's literally what you're doing, is just counting up the number of times that those letters appear. So I say here, tally the prevailing metrics and enter the sums into the tally section. So I count the letter A. I've got 1 instance, 2 instances of A. So A equals 2, and I put a 2 here under A for metric 1. I look here, and it looks like I've got a single instance of B, so B equals 1. B metric 2, that just gives me 1. I've got 2 instances of C. Here's 1. Here's the second one. So I sum those up. I get 2 C's, and I put a C here for metric 3. And then the last one is D. I've got a single D, so D equals 1. And I put a 1 here for metric D. Now, so this is my count of each time, the sum of each time that those letters show up in my section here to the left. And then I've got to remember that I've got 6 total comparisons, right? That's what I say here, 6 total comparisons, because that will get us the value in this percentage column, which we'll do next. Now I'm noticing that I'm running up against a 15-minute time limit. I do want to stop and give you guys a break. So let's stop here, and we will revisit, starting with this slide, the rest of the presentation in a moment after you guys take a little rest. Okay, so see you in a second.